Well, Michael, there have been a lot of questions over the past couple of weeks of how Labour should respond to their defeats in the 6th of May elections, but looking at the Guardian comment section, I think we found some wisdom. So this is from commenter Shambo. Really, it's time for Starmer to face down these interviewers. So this is what Shambo thinks Starmer should say. Look, if the voters in Hartlepool are happy to vote for an openly corrupt party and a serial liar of a Prime Minister, there's nothing I can do about it. Only they can decide when they've had enough. Meanwhile, we will continue to highlight the disaster the Tories are bringing to many doorsteps. Now put that in your pipe and smoke it. He thinks Starmer should say that, and then the replies, I would cheer that to the rafters. God, if only. Thankfully, Starmer has not responded in that way, Michael, like those Guardian commentators wanted him to. But we're going to go through why his response anyway has been awful. But first, of course, just to set some context, we are, of course, talking about the 6th of May elections where Labour didn't do so well, did they, Michael? Losing the Hartlepool by-election, losing a lot of councils. But anyway, Michael, we're, of course, in this video, like I said before, talking about Labour's response. And I think a good way to respond to a heavy election defeat is often see where you did well and then try to copy or replicate that on a national level if you're Starmer. And like I said before in the last video, there were some bright spots for Labour. Do you want to tell us where a couple of those bright spots were?
Yes, if I can remember them. I think one of the big ones, and the one that I most immediately remember, is of course Andy Burnham's victory in Manchester, which is of course big news. And of course a notable council win was Preston Council, where they did super well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Preston Council is quite interesting because here's the thing, Labour lost seats in a lot of areas with similar demographics to Preston, Brexit voting, like Leave areas, and in Preston was one of them. But the reason why Labour did well in Preston is because they had a lot of strong, some would say maybe socialist policies, or definitely policies that help people basically, and if you want to go and look at what they did, you can. But basically, a lot of policies that helps the local people of Preston, and they ran on that. And unsurprisingly, the people of Preston responded well to that, and Labour held that council. That is a clear distinction from all the other results in councils that had a similar makeup in terms of, like I said, demographics and voting history, as Preston did. And as Michael mentioned, Andy Burnham in Manchester. Andy Burnham gained 4%. He won 63% of the votes when he stood for Manchester Mayor last time. This time he won 67%. And of course this comes as, Labour in London didn't do as well as they did in 2016. They didn't do as well in many mayor races across the country. But Andy Burnham actually did better than he did previously. So why is this, Michael? Why is this? Well, let's take a look at Andy Burnham first. Remember back in the winter of 2020 last year, he was one of the people in the north of England in particular who stood firm against the Conservatives, who wanted to give Manchester and other places like Manchester less money because of the pandemic. Of course, they were putting various cities and towns into tiers because of the coronavirus, and Andy Burnham campaigned and was very forceful in trying to get more money for Manchester, and his approval rating because of that shot up. I think the people of Manchester very much appreciated him standing up to the Conservatives and fighting back against the Conservatives. And you contrast that to Keir Starmer, who basically gave up the city of Liverpool to the Conservative Party after the Liverpool Council and Liverpool Mayor were judged to have been involved in some corruption, and therefore Keir Starmer said, let the Tories take over. Labour can't handle Liverpool, clearly, even though Liverpool has been a stronghold of Labour. And you can contrast the two approaches of Starmer and Burnham there quite easily. And then looking back to Preston, of course, Preston Council campaigning on popular policies, which helps the people of Preston. Did Keir Starmer do that? Did Keir Starmer give any indication that he was going to change the lives of people across places like Preston? No, he did not. He did not offer anything, as we said in the last video. He literally did not stand for anything. There was no vision at all. And therefore, I think it's pretty clear to see what the Labour response should be. They should look at Preston. They should look at Manchester. And discern from that people want a Labour Party that stands up for them, that offers them, a better life, and is strong and basically bold, and not, a party which stands for nothing, which is what Keir Starmer's Labour, like we said last week, appears to be. So what do you make of that, Michael?
Yeah, and I think standing up for something is important because obviously one of the big issues Labour have had in the North is that there is a bit of a disconnect between their general kind of social policies and a lot of the kind of traditional conservatism of a lot of working class Northerners. And I think therefore the best thing they can do is stand for something. And in particular, if they stand for a working class populist message, then that's going to take the focus away from areas where they disagree. And I think one of the big issues with Keir Starmer's Labour is that they seem to have tried the approach of standing for nothing and hoping that will mean that they get support from everyone who will, I guess, will just assume that Labour stands on their side. But I think the reality is British people tend to be quite cynical, and if you stand for nothing, people will assume the worst and notice the disagreements much more than they will notice the agreements. So you really need to push the agreements where they can be found.
Yes, Michael, just like what happened back in 2017. I mean, we mentioned it last week, but that is the case. You had people who disagreed with Labour socially, more conservative voters, but they voted for Labour in their droves, like they did in Hartlepool in 2017, or like they did in Preston or across the North, because Labour offered an economic vision that they agreed with and they enthusiastically supported. So the question is, will Keir Starmer and the Labour right wing learn these lessons, Michael? So I think we made it clear what we think Labour should do, what their response should be. However, the Labour right and Keir Starmer are unlikely to heed those lessons because, well, their reasons for why Labour performed so badly on May the 6th elections were quite disappointing, to say the least, from our perspective anyway. They came up with some conclusions as to why they lost in areas like Hartlepool or in Bristol, or had their worst performance ever in Scotland, which were quite interesting to say the least. So let's go through them now. First up, we have the vaccine bounce. Now, this was a big Labour, centrist talking point before the election. The Conservatives were going to have a vaccine bounce. And, you have to admit that probably the Conservatives did do better if the vaccine rollout had not been as good. But the problem was with this analysis that Labour also lost seats to the Green Party. In Bristol, for instance, like we mentioned last week, or in the Wirral, or in Sheffield, like the Greens ran amok on Labour in a lot of areas. And of course, the Green Party had nothing to do with the vaccine bounce. So yeah, that is something. What would you say to that, Michael?
Well, I guess Labour also had to watch out for the Vac Green bounce. That's my obligatory pun for the video.
Yes, Michael, the Vac Green bounce. Well done. You nailed it once again. Also, Michael, COVID was blamed for Labour's bad performance, but not in the way you may think. This is a headline from The Guardian. COVID restricted Keir Starmer from setting out vision for UK. Says Labour. So apparently the coronavirus is this magical thing which, it can make you sick and all, but it can also, block the airwaves or, the internet, and can stop people seeing and hearing what Keir Starmer has to say on various, political topics. It's a weird thing, that COVID, isn't it, Michael?
No, yeah, I mean, obviously we jest, but I guess the point there is supposed to be, well, COVID was such a big thing in the news that Labour had to spend all of their time focusing on COVID rather than focusing on the actual meaningful policies they want to introduce, which is, of course, especially funny, seeing as on COVID policy, Labour wholeheartedly agreed with every single aspect of the government, which is also not a great strategy if the main thing in the media, by your own admission, is somewhere where you completely agree with the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, here's a key thing, we could have a situation where Keir Starmer outlined the serious inequality that was going on within the UK. And COVID, I think it's fair to say, has exacerbated that to some degree, has exaggerated this, and it's a perfect opportunity for Keir Starmer to point that out, and Labour, but because they don't agree with this political analysis, they did not. And so the COVID excuse for me is a rubbish excuse. You should get a better one.
Well, it sounds like you want Keir Starmer to not wholeheartedly stand behind the government on their COVID policies.
Yeah, I know, crazy, right? But here's another excuse, Michael. Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Cromblin. He's at it once again. He's sabotaging Labour. He's making them lose elections. And here's the thing: the Labour right did not explicitly say that the results from May 2021 were because of Jeremy Corbyn, but there were some inferences to it. Take a look at this tweet from Sienna Rogers, a journalist at Labour List. Labour source: these were always going to be tough elections for Labour. Keir has always been honest about the mountain we must climb to rebuild the trust to win the next general election. Labour is listening, and we will continue to change in order to win back the trust of working people in Britain and their communities. So again, an inference that, we need to change more, basically. That's why we're not doing so well in these elections. We've not changed enough from Jeremy Corbyn. And also there's this tweet from Wes Streeting, who said, I'm so sorry for Paul Williams Labour, that was the candidate for Hartlepool, and the brilliant team who've been slogging their guts out in Hartlepool in recent weeks. Our leadership has changed for the better, but the voters aren't convinced that Labour has too. Maybe your voters aren't convinced that the leadership has changed for the better, I don't know. This is a huge and urgent task. Keir gets it, so must we. So again, there's this influence that, we have changed, but the voters don't know it yet, so we need to change even more. And this is what I talked about last week. Like, how much further do you want to go? Like, Jeremy Corbyn is not a Labour MP already. Like, I don't know how much further. Do you want to kill Jeremy Corbyn? Is that it? Like, put him in the ground, and then finally voters will be convinced? And it's not even a good argument either, as can be seen from this quote from Paul Williams himself. You can see him below. This is his quote while he was campaigning in Hartlepool. Nobody has mentioned Jeremy Corbyn to me during this election so far. People are looking to the future. People can see the Labour Party is under new management with new leaders nationally, he told Sky News. So Paul Williams is saying, no, nobody's talked about Jeremy Corbyn, and in actual fact, people recognise that the party has changed. That was him apparently talking to voters, and so therefore the argument that the voters actually still think this is the party of Jeremy Corbyn does not seem to jive with reality, unsurprisingly, Michael. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you say, how much further can they go? And I think the only possible way they could spin this would be to be like, well, maybe the voters think because we've been so insane about trying to get rid of any aspect of Jeremy Corbyn, it must mean that secretly we're still slightly, like, it almost seems like they're so anti-Corbyn. I could almost see some people being like, it seems kind of suspicious that they're so anti-Corbyn. It's a classic, the Labour doth protest too much. But in terms of just the face value rejection of Corbyn, there literally is no further they can go. But of course, the funny thing is, even if we were talking about disassociating themselves with Jeremy Corbyn, the way they should do that is by putting forward a different positive vision, not just characterising themselves in terms of everything they're not, because obviously that's the exact wrong strategy.
Well, here's a strategy that Peter Mandelson, one of the head advisors to Keir Starmer, has thought up. Basically, after the election, he said that the reason Labour did not win in Hartlepool is because they are not embracing quote-unquote Brexit values. And basically, he gave this interview to Sky News where he said that Labour basically needs to embrace these Brexit attitudes if it wants to win back places like Hartlepool. And he didn't say it was about the EU really, but it was about, I guess, more socially conservative attitudes. See, that's the path he wants to go down. And this is what I think I said in the interview I gave you last week for your radio show. It was a case of Labour can go in two directions. If they want to win back places like Hartlepool, they can be more socially conservative, or they can be, like Jeremy Corbyn was in 2017, and have a fantastic economic agenda that can attract those voters. And of course, the Labour right do not want to go down that path, so the only path forward for them, and Peter Mandelson seemed to be hinting at this, is to be more socially conservative. Now, here's the thing. Mandelson talks a lot about Brexit attitudes, and he says, the sorts of cultural or social values or outlook that we associate with Brexit rather than the issue itself. But interestingly, in that interview, he was not that specific as to what those social or cultural attitudes mean. And I would love if these people who talked about, Brexit values like Mandelson actually came out and said, well, what do you mean by that? What would you say? What are your policies on that? Because here's the thing, that it's an area which, is quite a tricky area to navigate, because basically what you're saying is, we need to be more racist, guys. That's what we need to be. But the problem with this strategy, even if it did work, which I don't think it would, but even if it did, you're putting off younger Remainer voters, people who live in Bristol, who just voted for the Green Party, say. You cannot win a general election with this strategy because the country is too divided. Labour did so well in 2017 by winning both social conservative and socially liberal voters because they focused on an economic agenda. This strategy for Mandelson would not do that, and therefore they would lose. But of course, for Mandelson, that doesn't seem to be a concern of his, like we have said over the past couple of weeks. What do you make of that, Michael?
Well, yeah, I think it's a bad strategy for like three reasons. One of which you already said, so I won't repeat it. But the other reason is it's like you can't really out-conservative the Conservatives. You know, the Conservatives have managed to really get a hold of the image of being the Brexit party. And therefore, I think a lot of the people who voted for Brexit have now got that positive association with the Conservatives. And I think Labour aren't really going to be able to win those people over unless they try to be even more conservative than the literal Conservative Party. And this leads to the third and final reason why I think it's bad, which is, you were saying how it would be interesting to hear what kind of policies would be involved in this. And of course, the funny thing is it would basically be being racist. But the other thing about it is I suspect in terms of actual concrete things, they're not going to say much. It's kind of like, it's almost like a reverse Joe Biden, where it's going to become their new soul of the nation. You know, they're not actually going to talk in terms of anything meaningful. And therefore, again, even if it did work, which I agree with you, it probably wouldn't, I don't think it would even be able to convince people because they're not actually going to offer any kind of meaningful policies that speak to these people. They're just going to go out and, I mean, we've made this joke before, like, they're just going to drape themselves in Union Jacks and be like, look, see, we're the patriotic party now. And obviously without any clear messaging, it's not going to puncture through to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. It's a strategy which is destined to lose and may even be designed to lose. But anyway, let's move on to the last reason as to why the right section of the Labour Party thought they lost on May the 6th, or the reason that they gave, and that was looking too inward. So I want to play a Starmer interview he gave the day after, talking about why he did badly and what he wants to change for the future within Labour. Have a look.
What will you do? Because some people in your party are going to say you need to move more towards the Jeremy Corbyn agenda, others away from it.
This is not a question of left or right. It's a question of whether we're facing the country. We have changed as a party, but we've not made a strong enough case to the country. We've lost that connection, that trust, and I intend to rebuild that and do whatever is necessary to rebuild that trust.
But what does change mean in, say, policy terms?
It means stopping as a party, quarrelling amongst ourselves, looking internally and facing the country and setting out that bold vision for a better Britain and changing the things that need changing. And that is the change that I will bring about.
So yeah, we'll talk about part of Starmer's answer a little bit later on, but I want you to focus on what he said near the end, which was, that they're quarrelling amongst themselves too much, are the Labour Party. He said that they need to stop looking inward, stop fighting, stop these factional disputes, essentially. And I think that is incredibly ironic because of what has happened in the past year, where Keir Starmer and his section of the Labour Party have been most enthusiastic in engaging in those factional battles, hence, suspending Jeremy Corbyn, for instance. But anyway, just 24 hours later, again, the Labour Party were, wouldn't you know it, quarrelling and battling with each other after Keir Starmer decided to sack Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, from the party chair position. So you can't be sacked from the deputy leader because that's an elected position, but she was the party chair, and Starmer sacked her. And here's the thing, Michael, there were questions about why he did this, because Angela Rayner was not involved in the campaign in Hartlepool or across, the nation for Labour on the May the 6th elections. So why did he decide to do that? Well, apparently Angela Rayner had been criticising Jenny Chapman, who was Keir Starmer's political secretary, and Starmer was not very happy about this. This is from Gabriel Pogrund, who said, source close to Starmer says he has personally been very upset by negative briefings about Jenny Chapman, his political secretary. And like I said, apparently some of those negative briefings were from Angela Rayner, or the office of Angela Rayner. And so it appears that Angela Rayner criticising Jenny Chapman was maybe the reason why Starmer, in fact, got rid of her. Also, there was this crazy story about someone who worked for Angela Rayner saying, in an Indian takeaway that she liked Jeremy Corbyn more than Keir Starmer, and this was reported back to Keir Starmer. Again, somebody who worked for Rayner, not Rayner herself, saying this. So this is all very petty, I guess, very petty. And then you had this tweet from Tim Shipman, which has since been deleted, which said, Labour source claims that Jenny Chapman has been banned from Keir Starmer's house on the orders of Starmer's wife. The plot thickens. Like I said, he then deleted that, and literally the day we're recording, he released this personal statement, which said, on Saturday the 8th of May, I posted a tweet about Jenny Chapman and Sir Keir Starmer. Some people may have inferred that I was suggesting a relationship between the two. That is not purely professional. That was not its intention or context. Any such inference is untrue. I apologise for the distress caused. No disrespect was intended to anyone, and particularly not to Mrs. Chapman, to whom I have written, and will pay compensation. So it appears that there was some rumours flying around that Tim Shipman got a hold of, that maybe Keir Starmer and Jenny Chapman were not having that professional relationship, and that's why Keir Starmer might have been so offended when Angela Rayner said some bad things about Jenny Chapman, and that's why he sacked Angela Rayner. Of course, this is all just rumour and, hypotheticals and putting the pieces together in the puzzle. But yeah, basically, Michael, just 24 hours earlier, he said that he wanted to stop this quarrelling within the party, did Keir Starmer, and he seemed to literally have done the exact opposite. Again, it seems just incredibly petty, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like kind of the stop punching yourself like thing, or a bit like gaslighting in a way, to literally be consistently doing something and then turn around and be like, we've got to stop doing this thing. And it's like, you're the only one doing it. And it genuinely is. Like, it feels like it should be a meme. I mean, we made the joke before about the whole, like, Hannibal Buress, Eric Andre thing. But it is literally like that. He's doing the very thing he says we shouldn't be doing. And then he goes on TV and it says, what we need to do is stop doing this thing that I'm doing.
Well, that's the thing. For the past few years, when Jeremy Corbyn was leader, that's what the Labour Party, or his section of the Labour Party, were best at. That's what they love doing, like factual infighting, like quarrelling, complaining to any political pundit or journalist, of the Sunday Times, the Daily Mail, or even Guido Fawkes, that the Labour Party is awful, and yet Keir Starmer was one of those MPs who, of course, benefited from that and probably did that. So it's no real surprise, if you think about it, that this factual infighting has continued while these guys now have the power. Yeah, it seems that it's the only thing that they're good at or even want to do. Also, in terms of political appointments, Annalise Dodds was sacked as Shadow Chancellor and was replaced by Rachel Reeves, Michael. She is now the new Shadow Chancellor, and Rachel Reeves, again, is an incredibly right-wing Labour MP. Maybe the first right in the entire party. She has some incredible quotes that she has said over the past few years, and I want to direct your attention to this headline after the 2015 election. Budget 2015, Labour to adopt harder line on deficit to distance party from Ed Miliband era. And this, by the way, Rachel Reeves saying this was one of the reasons why Jeremy Corbyn was elected in the first place back in 2015, because people wanted to move away from this. And yeah, Ed Miliband, ran a political platform in the 2015 election, which was, pro-austerity, basically. And yet, again, Rachel Reeves said, no, we need to go even further. We need to go even further to the right. And again, this direction is so different from Labour's 2017 election. Again, the election that everybody should be focusing on. And she is now literally the Shadow Chancellor, the second most powerful person in the Labour Party. So yeah, on that front, on having a better economic agenda to attract voters, it doesn't seem like Labour are going to go in that direction at all, does it?
Yeah, obviously Rachel Reeves, very, very right wing. And I think it does speak to the fact Labour's moving away from the strategy they've done best under, and they're moving towards the strategy that they obviously had in 2019 and 2015, where they didn't do as well. And they're saying, oh, well, the problem is we need to go even harder in that direction. And obviously having that focus on the deficit is completely the wrong attitude. And again, it does speak to an overall kind of negativity, where obviously focusing on deficit spending and reducing deficit spending is the attitude of, we're going to make sure we shrink the economy in order to make the economy better. Whereas, of course, what we want to be talking about is a more optimistic, we're going to build the economy, we're going to get growth and things like that. We're going to, make more jobs. And that's the strategy which I think Labour would do best under. And obviously they're moving away from that. And again, if they're hoping to compete with the Conservatives, what are they going to do? Are they going to try and out-conservative the Conservatives on fiscal policy as well as social policy? That's
literally what they tried to do after the budget. They said that corporation tax should not be raised, and were concerned about the amount of money the Conservatives were spending. I mean, that literally seems to be the strategy, and of course that is not going to work, as evidenced by the recent elections. But also, Michael, there has been talk from Keir Starmer of basically a policy review, basically understanding what Labour stood for, as you could see in that interview, which we'll get back to in a bit. But first, I want to play you a clip from John Ashworth, who was on Good Morning Britain today, and he had a clip which I think summarises Labour's problems quite well on the whole what do we stand for front.
Have you guys sat down yet and decided what policy? I mean, have you spoken to Keir Starmer? Have you sat in a room and gone, right, guys, what does the Labour Party stand for? Have you had that conversation yet?
Well, of course we have. We have our shadow ministerial, our shadow cabinet meeting.
Can you share it with us then? What does the Labour Party now stand for?
I can't. They're confidential meetings. I can't.
Confidential meetings? You're a political.
Share it with
It's very clear. The Labour Party.
The Labour Party
It is ironic, though, isn't it, Jonathan Ashworth, when you say we need to tell the electorate what we stand for, but we can't yet because it's confidential.
Well, I was talking about the particular meeting, but I mean, look, we are going to be having a big policy review with the country, and of course the meetings aren't that confidential. That was more of a sort of throwaway comment. But look, we're having a big policy debate and discussion with the country, and you'll see Labour coming out with exciting ideas.
Okay.
So yeah, again, like I said, it was a throwaway line, but it kind of gets to the heart of it. Really, like what we stand for. Well, it's confidential. We haven't told the country what we stand for yet. And think back to what Keir Starmer said in that interview we played for you earlier. Basically, when he was asked for concrete policy changes in response to the election results, he said, "Well, we will change the things that need changing, and that is the change I will bring about." Inspiring. And it does seem that the response from Labour seems to be, we definitely stand for something, and we'll come up with some exciting ideas, but we're just not sure about those yet, because here's the truth, Michael, they don't actually believe in those exciting ideas. They don't actually want that change. Otherwise, they would have made that case before the election and not after. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he speaks about it being confidential, I think it speaks to the fact that this is a Labour Party which isn't actually enthusiastic about bringing new ideas to the table. This is a party which is, I guess, very reluctantly going to do that because they know it's probably what they should do. And that's, I think, why they're kind of reluctant to come out and say, assuming they have some ideas, they're reluctant to come out and say it because they're not really proud of this new manifesto they have. They don't really think this manifesto is going to be the change that this country really desperately needs. They just want to be in power.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But lastly, this is another Labour response from their defeat. This is from Jessica Alcott. Very interesting line from Starmer at Shadow Cabinet. He says he will devote his summer, quote, not having rallies of the faithful, but speaking to people who don't vote for us, unquote. And she says, pretty obvious shift there from the previous leadership. Again, it's just these journalists so easily impressed. If just journalists can vote, Keir Starmer would have 650 MPs in the Houses of Parliament. But basically, Jeremy Corbyn, had rallies where a lot of his supporters chanted, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn," and Starmer wants to move away from that. The cynic might suggest, Michael, the cynic in me might suggest that it's because he can't have those rallies because not enough people want to turn up. I want to share with you this screenshot of Keir Starmer speaking to Progressive Britain. This is a think tank or a group which is, liked by right-wing Labour MPs. He did this last weekend. As you can see, Michael, in the top left-hand corner, a total of 56 viewers were watching the opposition party give this speech on Zoom. You could join this, session for £5. I don't know why the hell anyone would want to do that, but you could. You could pay £5 to listen to this. Keir Starmer got 56 viewers for his speech. I'm not sure that counts as, quote, speaking to the nation. I think there are far more people in the nation than 56 people, and there may even be more than 56 views we get on this video talking about this Zoom meeting. There was also Peter Mandelson, as you can see. He managed 28 viewers. That is, half of what Keir Starmer got. But then there's David Miliband. Remember David Miliband, the brother that should have won? He got even less than Peter Mandelson, only 23 viewers. So I don't think that the Labour right wing speaking to the nation is going as planned, like Starmer wanted to. What do you think?
No, it seems like they don't really get the fact that you need to have a core of support, and they're kind of saying, "Oh, we'll just talk to everybody." And everyone will want to listen to what we have to say. But the point is, you need those people there who will actually listen to you and will actually go out and campaign to you. You can't just expect people who have no interest in you to suddenly be like, "Oh, I want to spend £5 to listen to these people, talk about this stuff." They do need to actually bring out a message which is going to, make people enthusiastic. They can't just be like, "Hey, indifferent electorate, fancy a chat." And obviously, if they do that, well, you get the results that we've seen, that nobody really cares.
Yeah, and why would anyone want to chat to them? Because again, what are they offering? Like we said before, they really don't stand for anything. And we started this video talking about the successes of Andy Burnham or Preston Council and saying Labour should copy them. But as has been made clear, Labour and Keir Starmer definitely do not want to copy them. And here's the thing that happens a lot after you have a member of your party who has success in a particular region, and that leader goes to visit them, for a photo op, or he calls them to say well done and asks for their advice. None of that. Keir Starmer did not congratulate Andy Burnham or Preston Council or say anything about that. He just does not seem interested in their success, and that's because he's not interested in their political policies. He's not interested in going down that direction, that Jeremy Corbyn direction, if you will. And that is because this section of the party, they only want to attack the left. It does not matter about if it's a losing strategy. Their top priority is to make sure that Jeremy Corbyn is not repeated in the Labour Party and they maintain control of the party. They don't want Labour to be a vehicle of the left wing in the UK like it was between 2015 and 2019. That is the worst outcome for them. And, this is the analysis for every Labour video, it seems like. It doesn't matter. They're doing all this wrong stuff, but it doesn't matter for them because the only thing that matters is they're in charge and, the Jeremy Corbyn faction of Labour is not.
Yeah, I mean, remember when it used to be everyone said, oh, Jeremy Corbyn, he's not actually focused on wanting to win elections. He's just focused on speaking to his own little in-group. And it's like, well, how the tables have turned. And I think the problem is, if you're going into this as Labour, assuming that the reason Labour lost is because of support for and the, I guess, perceived competence of the government, I think you're already setting yourself up for some bad analysis, because the reality is lots of people have been saying, I mean, certainly people in Labour were saying it when Corbyn was in charge, the recent history of the Conservatives is one such that Labour should have been expected to win, and therefore they need to look at this not from the perspective of, oh, look how well the Conservatives did because of their vaccine bounce. They need to say, well, look how badly Labour did when they should have done better, and obviously looking to the votes that they lost from all parties is going to be a key step there. So unless they have some incredibly good top secret plans on how to turn things around, it seems like Labour, I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but it doesn't look good.
Yeah, it does not look good. That is a pretty clear statement. And, I genuinely don't think we're, being hyperbolic when we say we could be looking at a dying party here. We could be looking at some PASOKification. There we go, nailed it. That was a Greek Social Democratic Party which collapsed in a very short span of time because just nobody wanted to vote for it, and it killed itself. And that appears to be what Labour are doing. There's this tweet from Jim Pickard, which is very interesting to me. He said, "Got a feeling Starmer's leadership is safe for a long while, regardless of any local election results." So this was before the local election, given most of his MPs are terrified of the membership giving them another Corbyn. Now, of course, Starmer did worse than Corbyn, and, Labour are polling very badly. Keir Starmer is polling worse than Jeremy Corbyn, polled at the same stage of Corbyn's leadership. And this is all without a smear campaign, by the way, from the press as well. And it just seems that, these Labour MPs, they don't care. The Labour right wing do not care, because as long as Corbyn isn't leader, well, that's the main thing that matters. And so therefore we could genuinely be looking at a party which just kills itself, because the only successful direction it can go in is one which the Labour Party members are ideologically and I guess just pathetically opposed to. So are Labour doomed? It looks that way. As long as Keir Starmer is leader, Michael, and that section of the Labour Party is in control, I don't see any good days for Labour in the near future.